1470 is WWNN Pompano Beach and 95.3 FM W237BD Boca Raton, the Health and Wealth Radio Network. Talk 1470 and 95.3 FM, the Health and Wealth Radio Network. Get involved with Community Connections with Norma G. Mondays at 5 p.m. WNN.
You can become independently healthy, and I'll tell you how. Dr. Bob Martin here. If you want to feel, function, and perform the very best you can, please tune in and call into my show Sunday mornings at 10 on Talk 1470 WNN.
Everyone knows about kids who are bullied, but what about the bullies?
We grow up, only now it's hazing and cyberbullying. We're more likely to use drugs and alcohol and don't do as well in school. And after we graduate,
we get jobs, but we're going to have more traffic violations and criminal convictions. And since we're more likely to be abusive to our spouses, maybe we're teaching our kids to be just like us.
Early intervention helps us all, even the bullies.
This station is part of the Beasley Best Community of Caring. For more information on how to stop bullying, visit our website.
Talk health, talk wealth, talk politics. Talk 1470 and 95.3 FM WNN.
The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors.
This is Tanoa Lynn Poirier, and I want to welcome you to Community Conversations on WNN 95.3 FM and 1470 AM. This show is about you. I want to hear your trials and triumphs, challenges and victories, and how you overcome obstacles every day in our dynamic industry. All callers are welcome to join Community Conversations. This is where we'll discuss all things in common. We'll discuss managers, directors, vendors, and owners. Let's elevate the conversation. Raise the bar. Start here, now. Hello, happy Friday. Welcome to Community Conversations with Tanoa. I'm your host, Tanoa Lynn Poirier, and it's really getting toward the end of the year. It's the Friday before Christmas. Merry Christmas. I'm hoping that you are getting through all of your list and that you are not as stressed as you have been in previous years, and that you really recognize it's really not about the presents, it's about getting together. And I heard some amazing stories today about my challenges that you've seen in other shows about how people are being kind and generous and asking the people with whom they are being generous to pay it forward. So those stories are coming up and they're amazing. I'm so excited, which I'm going to share with you later. I also want to give a shout out to last week's guest, Tom Willis, who dropped some pearls, which I picked up. And I actually, Tom, if you're listening, had someone say that it's better the second time around because they missed a lot of your wisdom in the first one. So I'm also replaying that so I can pick up those pearls. Cannot wait for him to come back. This show is sponsored by Trusted Construction. If you can dream it, they can build it. They're a general contractor in Palm Beach County, but they can work anywhere in the tri-county area. You can reach them at 561-582-5758. So as I teased in social media advertising today, we're going to do another 5 at 5. It's 5 o'clock, and so we're going to get after it. And this is just my way of trying to bring to light some things that are happening in the community association industry, some things that are maybe coming down the pike, or is the pike or the pipe? I don't know. I'm sure someone will tell me. Coming down the river, and some things that we're experiencing now, and some things that have kind of been lingering that we need to deal with since sort of 2010, 2011. So one of the first things I want to talk about for my hot topic number uno is drones. So they call those what? Unmanned aircraft systems is what they're also called. And they actually have to be registered. They're sort of FAA aircraft. Now, they're toys, essentially, but they can be used for a myriad of uses. Realtors use them. Contractors use them to take aerial photos of their work, like roofing and community associations work, so that they can kind of show that work to prospective, clients. Realtors use it to get a bird's eye view of properties. kids use it to just because it's a kind of a fun toy. The problem in community associations in particular is that it may rob people of their right to privacy. What I mean by that is, imagine somebody lying at the pool, enjoying themselves, sunbathing, and they're kind of sleeping, and they are not really aware of what's going on. Maybe they have some earbuds in their ears, and there's a drone with a camera taking pictures of you when you're in a reclining position, just trying to enjoy yourself, but perhaps you're in a bathing suit. That is an invasion of privacy. And so associations have to regulate this kind of behavior in communities, and it has to be in your documents, because as a community association manager, when someone tells me to go enforce something, but it is not in the rules, I can't enforce a rule that is not a rule. And we've talked about that before. So the associations have to coordinate with their council, adopt reasonable rules that managers can enforce, and begin to sort of understand how these new technologies really do affect associations in ways that we hadn't imagined 10 years ago. There is a way to do that by amending the documents. Now, a lot of times that requires a vote of the membership, but that can happen if you explain why it's necessary, that the scenario that I just laid out could happen. Then what happens with that picture that's taken? That picture ends up on social media. Perhaps it's a tool to use to bully somebody, to make fun of somebody, or to share with somebody who probably looks terrific in a way that they have not given their permission. So drones are something that we didn't have to wrestle with, think about, consider before. And I'm saying this because at Christmas time, people ask for these gifts, drones, and they're going to start buzzing around the communities. And if you don't have a rule in place, how are you going to enforce that? Now, they have to be registered, but how do you know they're registered? That's not something you can ask. And it really can be used by somebody, I think 13 years and older. And I think to register that, it's $5 or less than $10. So it's a fairly easy problem to have that you've got to get in front of. There are going to be some for Christmas. I promise you, there always are. So think about it as you move into next year, how you can get in front of it for next Christmas, and then how you can begin to regulate the use of drones in communities. Think about it. My next topic is really hot, and it is really hot in places like Canada, Colorado, Washington State, Oregon, I believe. And what I'm referring to is the legal use of cannabis or marijuana. Now, I've wrote a blog called Are You Ready for Mary Jane? And in that blog, I encouraged associations, particularly associations that can see it coming. Florida overwhelmingly voted in favor of medical marijuana in the last election, last November. And by overwhelming, I mean more than sort of 70% of the people said yes. Now, the next step to that has been, historically, recreational use of marijuana. So right now there is an issue in Florida relative to if someone has a prescription for medical marijuana and they are kind of a young person and they're kind of hanging out on the balcony or out of a back door or maybe inside the car, outside of the car, that kind of smoking in common areas or the regulation of smoking in the community, something you're going to have to discuss. Make a plan, make a rule, and have it voted on. If your community documents do not say smoking is prohibited in common areas, how are you going to prohibit this smoking of marijuana or cannabis or Mary Jane or a joint or whatever you want to call it? You can't. So as you start to see legislation, you start to see kind of a movement or a wave of things that are happening. It doesn't, if people want to do it and it's voted for and it's legal, okay. but the association has the ability and the right to regulate where certain things happen. And so I am suggesting that it's coming. It's certainly coming to Florida. It already is in Florida. It is not kind of ubiquitous. It's not everywhere, but in areas where they have already approved recreational use of marijuana, they're having to grapple with these issues after the fact. So I'm suggesting if it is on your ballot coming up, if it seems to be just slightly missed in terms of approval, that the next time it's introduced, it may very well be approved. And so getting ahead of your documents, having a conversation with your association council about, how do we manage this? What are we going to do? And there are a couple of other things related to how, if you have somebody who is using medical marijuana and it's legal and they have a prescription, how do you know that? So I will tell you what's going to happen, because this is what typically happens. It's that smoke is going to be offensive to someone, as is cigar smoke, as is cigarette smoke. And they're going to say to your manager, I need you to go over there and, tell them that they're not allowed to have that here because it's against the law. I don't have the right to go ask him if he has a prescription any more than I have a right to ask someone if they have a prescription for any other medication they're taking. Do you see where I'm going? It really is important to help shepherd your board in ways that are going to get in front of problems before they're problems. There's very little you can do about it. You just have to manage how you're going to respond to it when it happens. And if you don't give your manager teeth in the documents, they cannot enforce rules that are not rules. Do you see a kind of a theme happening here? Yes. So this isn't about complaining, and this isn't about being down on people who sort of need this kind of treatment. What I'm suggesting is there is going to be an opposition to this kind of liberty that is coming down the pike, and that it is going to be an issue eventually. There are going to be people who are huge advocates. There are going to be people who are staunchly against it, living in the same community and having this conversation now while it's just on a ballot and not yet legal, while it's still in the medical marijuana stage, because before it gets to the recreational stage. Do yourself a favor. I'm telling you that if you just look up on Google or whatever search engine you prefer and kind of research how the challenges are happening, I think that you'll agree that it's probably something you need to get in front of. So are you ready for Mary Jane? If you're not, you better get ready. I'm telling you, she's coming. So the third issue I want to discuss with you is my third hot topic. And they're hot topics according to me. And since it's my show, I guess I get to choose. The third issue is these third-party rental companies. And I'm reluctant to name them, but you know who they are. They help people rent their homes for very short-term stays, and they tend to make a lot of money doing that. And they do it all over the world. And it's kind of a way to swap a house and to go into a neighborhood and get the feel of a community without going to a touristy area where you stay at a hotel. You know what I'm talking about. The problem is, in community associations, there are rules about the length of time you can rent in those communities. The challenge for us as managers is that we see all sorts of people around the holidays, and we don't know whether they're visiting, whether they're family, whether they're taking advantage of this short-term third-party rental company, thereby violating the rules of the association. And so I'm going to encourage you again, if you are experiencing something like this and you are not sure whether or not the folks whom you are meeting are violating the rules, you can do one of two things. There are rules of the association. You can just say, hey, where are you staying? What unit are you staying in? Are you visiting? Where you're from? And if they're a little reluctant to give you the information, that may be kind of a red flag. Or if you see where they're coming and going from, you can contact the owners and say, hey, I didn't realize you were having family and you didn't notify the office. Do you just want to tell us who's staying? That may be a way around it. Another way is that you become a client of this service and that you monitor where these rentals are happening. Pardon me. And you may be able to see, much to your surprise, that the association you manage is actually listed on one of those third-party, very short-term rental sites. That way you can get in front of it. You can remind people in the community that's prohibited, and you can continue to encourage the board to tighten up the language for things that you can see coming down the pike. So we know it's a problem. We know it's a potential problem. And here's the thing is that we don't want to ruin everyone's fun. We don't want to take money out of someone's pocket. But people who have elected to live in associations have, by the fact that they've accepted the deed, accepted the rules of the association. And so some of those places are 24-hour, 365 gated communities. Some of them are concierge buildings, and the people pay for a certain amount of security and privacy. And if there's a steady stream of people who have not been vetted in communities that typically require an application, a background check, and an approval, and you don't know who's coming in and out of the building, that begins to erode the security, the integrity of that security. And there's also some kind of violation of the rules. So although it may sound a little mean and a little, I don't know, rigid, people live in those associations for this kind of, I don't know, security, protection, with an expectation that they are going to live with other people who follow the rules. And so that really is the biggest problem. But I've outlined a couple of ways that you can get in front of that and maybe help mitigate some of those issues. Let people know why it's important, as I've just outlined, and maybe they'll understand if they are considering it. But again, you've got to help your board coordinate with Association Council to strengthen the language in the documents to give the board and the manager teeth in order to enforce the rules. So we have gotten through 3 of the hot topics. The time goes so fast. I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to see you back here in 2, and we've got 2 more tips, 2 more topics. I can't wait to see you back here. I'll see you in 2. Imagine having one place you can call for all your residential needs, whether it's housekeeping, repairs, remodeling, pet sitting, laundry, or anything else your heart desires. La Concierge Services is your answer. Our qualified staff is carefully chosen, experienced, licensed, and insured. They are prompt, professional, and courteous. La Concierge Services is honored to serve in South Florida's most exclusive communities. With La Concierge Services, you have a full-service, personal concierge. We would love the opportunity to earn your business. Call 561-819-2059 for more information. La Concierge Services, your personal concierge. What is on everyone's mind these days when they think of starting a project in their home or community? Where can I find a qualified, certified, and licensed contractor I can trust? Allow me to introduce you to Trusted Construction. They have provided expert construction and roofing services in South Florida since 2009. Trusted Construction has earned a reputation for superior, consistent, dependable service. Trusted Construction will guide you from project conception to completion. Call 561-582-5758. Tell them Tanoa sent you. Hello, listeners. It's Tanoa Lynn from Community Conversations. Did you know I authored a book called 365 Tips for Community Association Managers, Property Managers, and Property Owners? Yep, I did. The book is filled with little, bite-sized morsels that may help anyone working and living in any community. From working with difficult people to building consensus for big projects. There is something in it for everyone. 365 Tips is available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. You can also go online to hellotanoa.com. That's hello, Tanoa.com. Welcome back. This is Tanoa Lynn Poirier with Community Conversations. And I want to remind you that this show is about you. If you'd like to join the show, you can call us at 888-565-1470. Let's get back to the show. Welcome back, listeners. You are listening to Community Conversations with Tanoa. Again, I'm your host, Tanoa Lynn Poirier, and it is my honor to have you investing a little of your time with me, whether you're listening live or going to listen later. This show is my 5 at 5. The show is at 5 o'clock, and I offer 5 hot topics once a month or so about things that I think are happening in the industry that need kind of a bright light shown on them. And we went through drones, then we went through kind of the use of marijuana in community associations and how that may affect neighbors who share walls, floors, and, ceilings. And then we talked a little bit about third-party, very short-term rentals where people are renting their homes or their second homes or third homes. And making a little money, but if it's in a community association, guess what? It's not, you can't do it. It's prohibited. It's not cool. So my next issue, and this is a big one, it's electric cars. Now, it's going to get more popular. There are going to be millions of electric cars over the next 10 years on the road. That is the prediction. The challenge is how that works in community associations. So stay with me. When you own your own home and you're in a regular neighborhood and you have a garage, you can install a charging station in your garage. The only person you have to get approval from is yourself or your spouse or your significant other, right? So you have a charging station, you have an electric car, you're on your way. If you're in an HOA, it may be easier, but it all depends on the configuration of your unit. Remember, the look of the community does not necessarily signify how it's organized under the statute. You can have condominiums and single-family detached homes. You can have HOAs that are townhouses that are attached. So it just depends on how your community was set up in the first place. But let's talk about condominiums in the traditional sense, where it's a high-rise or mid-rise or low-rise, but you have a common parking space that you use. How do you install a charging station for the single person who has an electric car? Now, I think you, in places like Oregon and California, I'm happy to be corrected on that. They have kind of mandatory charging stations for people who elect to have energy-saving cars, where they have electric cars. They make accommodations for people who have that. But if you're not in either of those places, how do you mandate that? How do you share that? Now, I think I have a few questions that I want to pose to the listeners in this regard. And the first one is basically, who's going to pay for it? And I think that's easy. The person who needs it. But imagine that you just have a garage where in one of my communities, this is the case. Some people can park against a wall. Some people are parked in the center. If you have a center parking space where there is no outlet near you, how is the association going to accommodate you? And this is not a small issue. This is actually a very real life issue. So then if you ask yourself, if you install this charging station for the electric vehicle, is that a material alteration? A material alteration requires 75 or 80% of the owners to vote on it. Are they going to vote in favor of the one person who has the electric car? In my experience, the answer is no. However, if there are 2 people, 3 people, 5 people, is what you're trying to do scalable? Does it make sense for the board to encourage energy-saving vehicles if people want them? Now, remember, everybody who lives in an association pays an equal amount to live there. It is in condos, you have an undivided interest in the common area. So, yes, you kind of own the space within your condominium, but you co-own all of the common space. So if you want an electric car, really, how can you be denied that? The one way is because it's a material alteration. So if the association does agree if the owners say, okay, you can have that, does it make sense for the association to create more charging stations in the event that more people are going to have an electric car? In other words, is it scalable? And if it's scalable, does it make sense to do it at the front end in anticipation of things that are happening? Remember, this 5 at 5 is really about trying to imagine what's coming down so that you can get in front of it and make rules, change your documents, make accommodations for things that are likely to happen in the future. Now, I will tell you that there are some people who would be over the moon and super attracted to move into a place that had an electric car charging station. That would be super attractive. So now you have a marketing tool for this association, and then you are kind of eco-friendly, and green buildings and eco-friendly buildings are kind of the wave of the future. So it may be something that your association would like to consider without having somebody sort of challenging them to make an accommodation before it even happens. How about that? That would be amazing. The last thing, I'm running out of time as usual. I want to talk about electronic voting. And electronic voting is another thing that's coming down the pike now, depending on where you live. If you can change your bylaws to change the voting process, sometimes that just happens with a board vote. Sometimes it requires a 14-day notice to do it with the owners. Sometimes it requires, you can't change the bylaws unless the community agrees on it. And I have a couple of communities that is the case. But electronic voting gives options. Now, this process is kind of complicated, but basically a third-party vendor has software that requires an owner to have a unique username, an identifier like a PIN code or some sort of code. They've got to, then they're issued a login and password. There has to be, I have to hurry up. They have to have security, and you have to get some kind of ticket or receipt after. You also cannot require people who don't want to vote electronically, the paper, old-fashioned paper kind, right? So then you would have at your election, you would have the paper ballots and the results of the tabulation from the electronic voting sort of looked at by your election committee or whatever it's called in your state. But you can't require people to vote electronically because you have installed this system or you paid for the system or that is your preference. But that is something that is an option in the future, and perhaps getting that language in your documents now as people begin to use their smartphones and tablets and home computers more. And that would increase participation, maybe, because it would be easier. The only challenge I see is that people over a year forget their username and password. So that would be the challenge. But think about it. You have been listening to Community Conversations with Tanoa, my 5 at 5. I hope you've learned something from it. It's coming. Get ready. I want to just say thank you for listening. I've had the most fun this year. I'm looking forward to 2018. Be a blessing to somebody. Merry Christmas. Don't get stressed. It's going to be fine. I'll see you here next time. Thank you for joining me. It was my pleasure. See ya. Bye. You have been listening to Community Conversations with Tanoa Lynn Poirier. It is my honor to host this program, and I appreciate you listening. We have an exciting show planned for you next week, so mark your calendars and join me every Friday at 5 p.m. on WNN 95.3 FM and 1470 AM. We look forward to hearing from you, our listeners. It's all about learning, sharing, and teaching. We're all in this together. Until next time, be a blessing to someone and endeavor to persevere.
The opinions expressed